pleasant good day to you. For Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. Thank you so much for being here with us on From the South. Today's top story takes us to Cartagena, Colombia, where the foreign ministers of Colombia and Venezuela have agreed to jointly combat crime along the border between both countries. Delcy Rodriguez of Venezuela and Maria Angela Hulguin of Colombia also announced further talks in the coming days to form a joint border security plan. The decision to close border crossings was announced recently by President Nicolás Maduro in order to crack down on smuggling and other crimes committed by Colombian paramilitaries in Venezuelan territory.
We have talked, and I believe this was one of the most honest and realistic meetings we have had in a long time, about the problems we have, about criminal gangs devoted to drug trafficking and to contraband, which affects both countries in the same way.
The foreign minister did not discuss, however, when the border crossings would be reopened. But since the measure was implemented, the Venezuelan border state of Táchira is no longer affected by shortages of basic food items and gasoline. These goods were being massively smuggled into Colombia, especially to Cúcuta, where prices are at least 10 times higher there. In contrast, Cúcuta is now facing shortages. Now we turn to our correspondent, Natalia Margarita. She explains the concerns of Colombian activists who are saying that the core issues that triggered the border crisis must be addressed.
Social movements have insisted on the importance of addressing the circumstances and conditions that have forced millions of Colombians into Venezuela, something that, according to social leaders, successive Colombian governments have persistently turned a blind eye to.
Exclusion, social marginalization, persecution, and policies such as the aerial spraying of glyphosate have forced Colombians to cross to Venezuela trying to survive, as in this side of the border they are mistreated, stigmatized, and chased. As we have said, the diaspora of Colombian mainly increased during the government of Álvaro Uribe.
During Colombia's armed conflict, the highest rate of displacement was registered during Álvaro Uribe's term. Now the former president was recently seen in the border city of Cúcuta, campaigning against Venezuelan government, sparking criticism for attempting to gain political benefit from the current border crisis.
Álvaro Uribe has always attempted to use the Venezuelan situation for his own benefit. That's what he did during his years of government. Uribe even said that he lacked the time to unleash an armed conflict with Venezuela. It has always been in his interest to wrongfully interfere in Venezuelan affairs.
As much of the attention has been focused on the measures taken by Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, political leaders insist it is time for the Colombian government to decisively face issues such as the smuggling and paramilitarism that are affecting both nations.
The Colombian government must take serious and strong measures towards paramilitarism and the possibility that paramilitarism transcends borders using smuggling as a funding mechanism, affecting in that way the goods that subsidize in Venezuela.
Tackling paramilitarism is also seen as a critical issue for peace construction, that as Colombia is attempting to bring to an end its armed conflict. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá, Colombia.
We continue our Latin America coverage in Mexico. That's where hundreds of activists marked 11 months since the 43 Ayotzinapa students were abducted and handed over to a drug cartel whose members, according to Mexican government, burned the students to ashes. Families of the victims still refuse to accept this version of events and are demanding justice and accountability in the investigations being carried out by the federal authorities. However, the case has been plagued by irregularities. So far, the remains of only one of the 43 students have been found. After the protests, reports are that police officers violently attacked demonstrators, injuring at least 2. Hondurans are expressing impatience with President Juan Orlando Hernández and his alleged involvement in a massive corruption scandal. They have repeatedly hit the streets in protest demanding his resignation. In the latest protest action, they were confronted by police officers who used tear gas and water sprays to disperse them. Clashes eventually broke out, but there have been no reports of injuries or arrests. Hernandez has admitted to using about $150,000 from a $200 million corruption scheme that involved overcharging the Institute of Social Security for services. Protesters want an independent investigation into the case. Another corruption scandal, this time in Guatemala, that has the nation in crisis. Protesters continue to take to the streets, calling on President Otto Perez Molina to resign. According to investigations, Molina is involved in a scheme to bribe businesses in exchange for lower taxes. In the next hours, more protests are scheduled to take place, and Congress will be debating the removal of Perez Molina's immunity so that he face trial. In the meantime, former Vice President Roxana Baldetti has been denied house arrest, and she will be forced to face trial in jail. She and many other cabinet members were forced to resign because of the scandal. And now a news brief of other stories making headlines across the globe.
The government of Kyiv and separatist rebels of eastern Ukraine agreed to strive for an end to all truce violations beginning next Tuesday, September 1st. Both parties had already agreed on a ceasefire last February. The agreement included plans for elections and the establishment of a sort of autonomy for separatist-minded regions. But clashes continue, hampering the truce. The Western-backed Kyiv forces continue to shell the rebels and kill civilians. But the negotiations in Minsk, Belarus, shed a light of hope for peace.
A rather interesting, rather balanced proposal was pronounced at these talks, to fully cease shelling as of September 1st. This proposal got positive response practically from all sides, and there is hope today that as of September 1st, we will manage to stop shelling from both sides.
Hungary is seeking to ramp up repression against refugees fleeing war and attempting to cross into Europe. Its forces showered hundreds of migrants with tear gas at a detention center. But the Hungarian government has announced it will deploy 2,000 border hunters to toughen repression tactics against refugees after reported 2,500 people rushed over the border in one day. Most of the refugees are from war-torn Syria. Refugees refuse to be fingerprinted in Hungary because they want to go to the Netherlands or Germany.
Germany, Holland. But I won't go Holland if the Hungary didn't fingerprints me. Yes.
Paratroopers from 11 NATO countries are taking part in the largest allied airborne training event to be held in Europe since the end of the Cold War. The multinational exercise, known as Swift Response 15, will take place until September 13 across 4 European countries. The drills are being led by the US Army. About 4,800 soldiers are participating in the drills. NATO has increased its presence in Eastern Europe, stating Russia is an increasing threat to the West, but have not presented evidence to sustain these claims.
Our division is called Swift Response, which means that the paratroopers are the first responding forces, which means that if there's a crisis somewhere and the political decision is made to send German forces, then we need ones which can be there within a few days.
Nigeria marked 500 days since Boko Haram kidnapped about 270 schoolgirls in the northeastern town of Chibok. The Bring Back Our Girls was expected to hold a march in the capital Abuja with a candlelit procession. More than 50 of the victims eventually escaped from the Islamic militant group, Boko Haram, whose name roughly translated as Western education is sinful, has killed thousands and displaced some 1.5 million people during a 6-year campaign to carve out an Islamic state in northern Nigeria.
Many thanks to our news team in Quito, Ecuador for the World News Brief. We end our newscast this morning on a lighter note. The International Tango Championships has ended, but there were no surprises as an Argentine couple won the title. Argentine tango dancers Clarissa Aragon and Jonathan Saavedra danced their way to become the world champions of Salon Tango Night in Buenos Aires. I guess not surprisingly, the second and third place spots were also claimed by Argentine pairs. But good news for Russia and Indonesia, who took the 4th and 5th spots respectively. Yeah, I'd love to learn that, huh? For more on these and other stories, please visit our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. We'll have another news brief for you just after midday.